Uh, hey, it's me again. I'm back, this time reviewing Northern Realms. Got my spreadsheet ready. I don't know what else to say for an intro. So fuck it, let's just go in. Poor fucking infantry. Poor fucking infantry indeed, I agree. Cards, like, technically sort of playable in Shoop if you're, like, desperate enough. I haven't really seen the card lately. It's kind of been crept enough that I would say it's solidly in the 1-star camp. You can theoretically use it as a Draug target too. Again, I'd call it crept. So yeah. That's taken care of. We've got Field Medic, just worse than this, 1-star. We got Redanian Knight. Redanian Knight's kind of weird. Redanian Knight makes it into a lot of Shoop decks. Because, like, 1 is kind of the magic number of Redanian Knight. Because it's a card that you want to play exactly at the start of a round that you think is going to be long. And you have a pretty limited window to play those types of cards. It does trade with Tourney Joust and the like, which is something a lot of Northern Realms cards don't do. So you're potentially, like, opening yourself up to a little bit of value on the opponent's side just by running this card. But in Shoop, you definitely, like, when the card actually does work, it's pretty good when you play it at the start of a long round. The armor can be really annoying as well. I'd give it 4 stars. It's not really like a defining bronze in any of the NR decks, but it usually makes it in. Temple Guard, I'd say it's a solid 1. Centurion Knight, I would give 2. You'd only ever consider it in Shoot, but I've seen it a couple times. It's a little more possible to see it making it into Shoop. Tutor gets a solid 1 from me. Royal Guards are really good. I don't know if Royal Guards are like 5 level of 4. Once again, they do trade with Tourney Joust and the like, so a lot of times you don't get to use the ability. I would say initially when this card launched, it was kind of crazy, but now that Prince has Radia, the niche of giving armor is like a little smaller. And the card, like, being low tempo right away makes it, like, not quite as impressive. So I would say it's probably, again, only a 4-star bronze. Though definitely would rate it higher than Redanian Knight, I think. Ralphall99, thank you for the sub. Much appreciated. Alright. Artificer. Could theoretically run it in a Ragnar deck, but I never end up actually running it in Ragnar decks. It's kind of just been crept. 1-star. Scytheman kind of wants to be in sort of like a boosty type deck. It's just super awkward to have your payoff card be 4p. The card does so much less than Visigurd, and Visigurd doesn't even cost like that much more. Also, Meve has just gotten crept hard. I think it's safe to say this card will never come back in its current state, which is how I defined 1-star. So I give it the 1. Siege Support. Siege Support used to be kind of neat in full test, but, like, only barely kind of neat in full test. Card has, like, a lot less use now. I think it's safe to give it a 1. I think it would need a buff to come back. Like, if you ever have Zeal be relevant, like, full test is, like, decent. I guess that might not necessarily be true, because Pinsir is so dominant right now. But, like, you're never just going to count on Siege Support to, like, run cards that need Zeal. Yeah. Ballista. Ballista's pretty solid. I mean, it's a machine. It can play 6 for 4. It's, like, at least a 4 for 4 that requires an answer. Goes into, like, every Shoop deck. Probably gets at least a 4 just for that. That's kind of the silly thing about NR. I get a feeling I'm going to be giving a lot of these shitty bronzes 4 stars just for, like, existing in every single deck. Because they just play for slightly more points than the other cards. And or are siege engines that play for about the same points as the other cards. K20 Surgeon. I mean, same thing. Card like is kind of neat in like Tridem decks and whatnot. In general, it usually just plays like 5 for 4. It's got some utility. Like it's like a little worse. You don't see it in like every shoop list. But I mean it's a 4P card and it's pretty good. It's kind of flexible. And it's like it's been around a lot. I'd give it 4. Siege Ladder. Siege Ladder I will downgrade to 3. It's in quite a few decks. But you definitely need to very specifically be playing like Siege to actually want Siege Ladder. And often, sometimes even there, you'll need Shoop for it to actually feel good. You sometimes run it, I guess, even in non-Shoop, just if you need 4Ps and you need Siege Engine Insurance. Like, this card's good in the Caretaker Siege decks as well. But, like, I don't particularly rate any of the NR variants where you'd play Siege Ladder to be particularly great. And it's also one of the cards that's going to be, like, replaced the fastest out of any of the Siege engines. Centurion Enchantress, I mean, I'd put it in, like, Sergeant tier. It's a little bit better in Sergeant and, like, the mid-rangey shoot piles that we're seeing a lot of right now, but it's still just, like, a 4. It's relevant. It's just not, like, super amazing. K20 Knight, I would give 3 stars. You see it in, like, some Portal NRs. Which tend to be like less common than a lot of the other builds, just because NRs have so many like unconditionally high value golds. It's hard to justify actually like building a deck around something at all. But the card's not bad. It's a little worse because of Mata, but you can still play it, and I have seen it still played quite a bit. Mauler. Mauler gets the Resident Sleeper 4-star treatment. I would rate it as probably slightly better than Ballista, but that's a point of contention for a lot of people. Obviously, it also depends on whether you're talking Siege deck or not, because then it's probably a little less controversial. Tridem Infantry. I'm not sure exactly how to rate Tridem Infantry, because Tridem Infantry doesn't make it into some of the shoops. But also in the shoops where it does make it, it tends to be a card that's like one of the better bronzes in the deck. It can potentially combo with Knighthood and be very good. I mean, the card is just solid. I'll just give it a fucking 4-star and just write it off. I don't want to think about these stupid NR bronzes anymore. Cavalry. Can see play in Ragnar. Occasionally sees play like outside of Ragnar, just as like something where if it gets pinged, it's good value. Like, just as, like, I don't know. I've seen a couple of people play it. Ragnar's obviously not, like, a competitive deck, but I wouldn't put it in, like, total meme territory. Like, I said 3 stars would be, like, a card that could be viable, but is not, like, super, like, currently relevant. So that describes this card pretty well. I'd give it 3. Scout. Scout is a key piece of a full test deck. Full test deck, I've actually still seen like be played a little bit. It is currently pretty outclassed by like the new like Caravan Vanguard deck, just like the Draug human pile. It's kind of not really the cleanest way to make humans anymore. But I mean that deck could come back. And like if the world changes around this card a little bit, it'll definitely return. So it's at least a 2-star card because of that. I just don't know if it's deserving of like a 2 or a 3. I think it's probably a little bit less relevant than this card. A little harder to make work. But like the full test pile still isn't that bad. It's kind of just outclassed by Calanth. It's viable, I would say, if you really wanted to play it. I'll give it 3. Yawn. Mad Charge. Mad Charge is kind of a weird one. I see a couple people play it in like very specific like shoop lists. So because of that, I guess it gets a 3. Man, rating NR bronzes just feels so silly. Okay, Rune Word I can safely give 1 star. Rune Word's god awful. Winch. Which is either a 3 or a 4, just like every other bronze in this category. I think Winch is probably only a 3. Winch is like not in your super average like Shoop list or just like NR list in general. It needs kind of a specific like machine list or a list that actually has units that you want to give charges enough. But it works. Like a little more warfare oriented as well is where it's more common. Yeah. On to 5s. We've got Redanian Elite. This card is pretty solid in the shoot pile. Unlike cards like Disgrace Ball or Kimura Worker, this card actually trades like fine with stuff like Tourney Joust. And there are a couple of other cards that you want to play that can trade with stuff like Tourney Joust. It can also be Curse Knighted. If you have no use for a Purify, your opponent has 1 turn to actually get the exposed value. Card's just like all around solid. I'd give it a 4. I think you can throw it into enough Shoop decks that it merits a 4, even though it's not like the most common of the bronzes that I've given a 4. Archer after the nerf is probably only a 4. Before this was like an easy 5. This card is still really annoying. This card is like really annoying, but it also does get swears. Like it has a couple of hard answers. After it can get killed by 4 damage, it's no longer like a particularly exceptional bronze. It's just one of the better bronzes in the pile. So it gets a 4. Envoy. Envoy is like hard to see coming back ever since they printed Aretuza Adept. They kind of just left this card be for some reason, and no one really knows why. Like it can be a little more tempo, I guess, but like even if you have one of the rare cards you want to give 2 charges to enough to make this like a 7 for 5, it's pretty much just that. So I'd give it a solid 1 star because it's pretty clear that they're not going to be making more cards with like super great charge abilities. They kind of went in the direction of making charges weaker. Landsknecht, I'd give it a solid 3. Shoot pile explanation insert there, maybe. Lyrian Arbalist at 5 feels pretty bad. I've seen a couple of decks play it still. Like, it's pretty bad, though. Do I want to give this card any more credit than, like, 1 star? No, I really don't. I'm gonna give it 1 star. Maybe in, like, there are some, like, Revenant pile decks, which aren't the worst things ever, where having cards like this to line things up can be really good, and you have stuff to answer anyway. But who am I kidding? I don't think those decks are really particularly great. And I don't even think Lyrian Arbalist necessarily goes into that type of deck. Rivian Pikeman, just 2 vanilla, not as good as the other cards. Give it a 1. Revenant I've seen a decent amount. You can combo Revenant with like Forbidden Magic Hensult, which is not the meta way to use it, but the card is still solid. Like that deck is still solid. You can still play that deck. It's pretty annoying to deal with, especially with Ronvid. It's also just like if the engine sticks. Like if you're playing monsters, this is the most miserable bronze to play against. And a couple of people just run this card. So like my experience is probably biased. But I feel obliged to give it at least 3 stars. Because it's just like I run into this card way more often than I think I should, and it always just ends up completely fucking me. More common to get fucked by it when you're against Draug, but that's a totally different story. Siege Master. Siege Master, pretty decent, honestly. Like, if you're running resupply, it's kind of a must kill. Like, it's pretty easy to get, like, just 1 or 2 boosts from this, and, like, The card can get a lot of value. It's not for like every shoot pile, and it's not amazing because it can kind of just die. A lot of people kind of ignore it, but like it can also just die. I'd give it 3 stars for being a pileable card. There are not many 2s. Temerian Infantry, easy 1 star, question mark. Compares mostly unfavorable, like it compares entirely unfavorably to Scytheman. It only counts 1 row. It costs 1 more P for point value. It's damage, so it can be removal, but it's really shitty removal. Wow, that card is bad. Calves. You probably play Calves and Meave, kind of. This card's like clunky. Obviously, this card's a lot worse when you're just playing like shoot pile and you literally just don't want to run this type of card. But like, I don't know. Honestly, it's just been crept out, and everything that could make it work has also been crept out. Like badly enough that I'd give it a 1. It would be dishonest to give that card 2. Sentry and Royal Guard. Okay, Sentry and Royal Guard is funny. If you can bamboozle people into thinking you don't have it, you somehow usually just get them all removed anyway and manage to lose. But the card is really funny. And it feels like there's got to be some way it could have potential. It doesn't though, so I have to give it a 1. It's pretty bad. Spellweaver. Spellweaver's been like pretty crept out. I think Spellweaver is the first 5P that I can honestly give a 2. Because like in a charge deck, the card's like sort of fine-ish. But that's kind of just not the way that NR is going right now. Like, the card's pretty nice with Aretuza Adepts, but you just like, it gets outclassed by enough things that you would need to have pretty much a full charge deck, which could come back for Spellweaver to really make sense. So yeah. Lyrian Cavalry. Lyrian Cavalry is pretty shit at 5. It is at least a little bigger. It's like pretty shit at 5. I'm giving that a 1. Battering Ram. Battering Ram is like a 7-point machine, so it automatically gets 4 stars. Whee! It's not always 7 points, but it's 7 points often enough to pile in a shoot pile. Aretuza Adept. Aretuza Adept is interesting because it's like probably the first bronze that I'm actually going to give a good score that doesn't go super well into a shoot pile. But Aretuza Adept builds sort of like, you know, not like the best NR deck, but like it builds a decent NR deck. Like it's pretty easy. Like if you want to play Aretuzas, you can fit them in pretty easily, and they're very aggressively done, and the Aretuzas will all be good. And there are multiple different ways you can build an Aretuza deck, and they're all pretty good. Like they're a little outclassed just because there are so many ways to build your NR pile right now, but I would still give the card 4 stars. Reinforced Trab. Playing it vanilla is ironic. Ironically, this card is worse because Siege exists. If Siege didn't exist, this card might actually be 5 stars. Just kind of so. Oh, okay, that's not true because if Siege didn't exist, then you wouldn't play it for Siege. But because Siege exists, it's awkward to have to play this on the ranged row. Although it is very good in mobilization, it does kind of build the mobilization deck, but the mobilization deck is just a shitty pincer maneuver deck. Change my mind. So I'll give it 4 stars. Siege Tower gets 4 stars for being a 7 for 5 machine. Reinforced Ballista. Okay, Reinforced Ballista. Reinforced Ballista is probably the best bronze I've reviewed so far. This card's kind of crazy. Especially with resupply now being relevant. Reinforced Ballista kind of feels like it sort of defines the, like, the NR pile archetype TM. Because it's really good with warfares, which there are a lot of good warfares that work with machines. And it also just encourages, like, granular damage, because cards that deal damage that's, like, not high enough to really be truly valued as removal suddenly becomes removal. And then you get a total steal because of that. So I think Reinforced Ballista does honestly deserve the first 5-star rating for NR. Card's kind of nuts. It feels like it sort of defines that deck, especially when there's, like, 2 copies of it. It's kind of impossible for a bronze to define a deck when you're only playing one. But, like, there are a lot of decks that just, like, bank off of having 2 of this card that don't play Radia. Caraballista, hey look, it's a 7 for 5 siege engine. It's a little better than the other ones. Not better by enough to give 5 stars. I give it 4 stars. Yeah. Although, again, like Reinforced Ballista, it's similarly quite good. A little less flexible. It's possibly 5. Like, this card's pretty annoying, but it's a 4-star card, I think. Damn Sorceress. I give Damn Sork. Damn Sork is weird. It's, like, not even great, even in Ragnar. I'll give it 2 stars. It's like, it can be fit into a deck that's currently, like, not there, but if Ragnar becomes there, it's not, like, obvious that this card doesn't make the cut. Mostly because of Immortals. Without Immortals, this card would be, like, a super easy dumpster one. Cursed Knight. Cursed Knight's pretty good. Especially for a faction that's a little lacking in Purify. You could run Cuckoo deck instead if you wanted, like, more quote-unquote real Purify. But, like, the shoot piles don't have enough engines to make you want to retain the card. And this is more efficient. It has a couple of other fringe uses as well, like the aforementioned Elite. I give it 4 stars. It's pretty common. Boiling Oil. Hey, look, it's Boiling Oil. It's a Warfare. It's a Thunder, but it's got Warfare, and the Death Blows, like, doesn't really matter at all and might even be a downside. 4 stars. How exciting. Thunder Warfare is literally all you need to know. Forbidden Magic. Forbidden Magic is pretty efficient. It's a card that can brick, but it's pretty rare to brick it. It's in a deck, like, most of the shoot piles don't really have enough threats to make Forbidden Magic worthwhile. But if you are running a deck that has, like, a few more engines in it, just, like, some scary stuff, and then still has, like, enough granular damage to make use of this card, it can be pretty strong. It's either a 3 or a 4. I see it around a decent amount. It works well in as, like, a TK option too. I mean, it's probably not quite as good as a lot of the other cards I've given a 4, just because it's less ubiquitous. So I'll give it a 3. Bombardment. Bombardment is actually, like, kind of crazy right now. I don't know if Bombardment deserves 5. Like, Bombardment seems a little bit more crazy than it is, just because it can play for a lot of points. And, like, it is a really good payoff card. But Bombardment does hit armor. There's often a lot of armor. Although Philippa also hitting armor makes that less of an issue. You kind of just power through armor most of the time when you're playing NR, is generally your game plan. It's a really efficient Warfare. I guess I do have to give it 5 stars. As gross as it makes me feel. because I don't want to look at this card. Zoria Runestone. There's no synergy for the Runestone. I give it 1 star. Like, I guess you could play it in Shoop, but like at this rate, why? There's like so much other shit you can play in Shoop. Alright. Moving on to 6s, which there are shockingly few of after like the giant pile of 5s. Immortal Cavalry. Playable in Ragnar, kind of. The card is weirdly not that great as just like a Ragnar target, because if you're just playing vanilla cards with shields, it's like not that amazing to then have to play Ragnar. Like, the most efficient way to use Ragnar is to have the shields actually protect something, and have like a Lebioda or something like that, and then get a bunch of engines going. That's all really clunky to do. So because of that, cards like this can be kind of nice. But like, it forms a separate deck, and that deck is like a little lacking in value right now. And it also just relies on making a giant Ragnar, which is like not particularly useful, or like a giant War Elephant, which is the other card that this card is good with. Because it is like it's pretty strong in Ragnar. Like, it deserves at least a 2 for that. If I gave Dam Sorka 2, I think I can honestly give Immortal Cavalry a 3, just because it's standalone pretty good. It's pretty annoying against NR, like, just as a value card, too. Temerian Drummer. Temerian Drummer feels a little bit crept as an engine, but you can still play it in some engine decks, but right now engine NR is kind of lol, compared to just, like, all of the mid-range options that NR has. I don't know if it's a 2 or a 3, just because it's like, on a Tridem, it's still pretty good. But like, I don't see it. I'm giving it a 2. It's not particularly amazing. Blue Stripes Commando builds the full test deck. The full test deck is probably better than like whatever deck you're putting Drummer into. I'd give it 3. Full test feels a little more viable than like Engine Pile, I think. Ronvid. Ronvid is really good in Draug, just as like a Draug target, or as a possibly as a human if you draw it late. Although that's not ideal, obviously. The Draug deck's like pretty good right now. Can also play it in like full test for the same reason. It's not a particularly amazing card, but I would give it 3 stars. It's viable. Sabrina. I feel like with the introduction of Surrender, there's probably less of a debate for Sabrina Lacerate if you wanted to run a Row Punish at all in like a Revenant deck, which it's less clear that you do now. So you're probably not playing this card again. But like, the strategy where you would play this card is still good. And you could have the meta evolve in a way where Sabrina becomes good again, and is just like the best choice of the Row Punish options. So I'll give Sabrina 2 stars. Vincent. I don't think Vincent's crazy. A lot of people look at this card and just like think it's ridiculous. But like, even if you get like a really good feeling, just like giant Vincent, when you add up the points, it's really not as much as you'd think, and they can often just be reset. Obviously, the card's very good in a Revenant deck, given the synergy. The card's a 4-star card. Like, the card kind of just speaks 4 stars. Cuckoo Dock. Cuckoo Dock you can play over Curse Knight. There are fewer decks that want Cuckoo Dock than Curse Knight, but those decks exist. I'd give them 3 stars. Knighthood. Knighthood pretty exclusively goes in like a Tridem, like boost synergy deck. There are a couple of other cards you could run if you wanted to make that like even more out there, like Pastodi and whatnot, but they've kind of fallen off. Like, I give Knighthood 3 stars. It's a viable warfare card that you can run if you're playing that package. Bloody Flail. 1 star. Reinforcements. Reinforcements is like pretty good. Give it 4. It's not like super obvious to run. It can be annoying because it forces you to keep a bronze, but honestly, this card like is mostly going into Siege NR. And in Siege NR, like, you need to keep bronzes anyway, just as like siege engines for your siege. So it's like pretty rare that this is actually a problem. So moving on to 7s, we've got Windhelm, a card that like doesn't fit the Ragnar theme at all. Like, you would only want to play this card in Ragnar, in Engine Ragnar, but then the point of Engine Ragnar is to like give shields to like good engines and not play this shitty Windhelm engine that also happens to go tall, which like none of the other engines do. I guess Ragnar goes tall. That's like one good thing I can say about Windhelm. But like, it's also so hard to refresh the ability if it gets pinged once. It's 1 star. Who am I fucking kidding? I just wanted to vent about that card a little bit. Anna. Anna's a pretty good engine. Not really the meta for engines, but you have to say that Anna at least has potential. Because the card is a lot of points. I've seen the card like a semi-decent amount. Almost enough to give it 3. Like, it feels like a card that you could consider running in like a Trident version of NR still, kind of. Problem is that the NR defender is super shit, and also NR is not really the type of faction that wants to run a defender because they run so little else that you can purify. And currently purify is pretty relevant. So because of that, I think I can only say that Anna could have potential to come back in her current state. So I'd give her 2 stars. Shile is kind of a little behind the curve. It's also, mid-range and art cards in general are very awkward. Just because there's so many high P cards that you want to run, and then you kind of just end up filling with low P. But Shile is viable. Give her 3. War Chariot. I'm not a fan, but enough people run this card that I feel obliged to give it a 3. Voimir. Voimir is kind of funny. Voimir can be ran in like the Revenant deck, and that's pretty much it. Honestly, the card's probably not terrible in that deck. I've seen it played against me a couple times. It's usually done pretty well. It feels a little bit win more, I guess, is my main complaint about it. Like, more than a little bit win more, maybe. But I don't know. I wouldn't call the card is probably viable right now if you wanted to play it. I would give it 3. Nathaniel's like a shitty Trident, pretty much. Like, the ability looks really good the first time you read it, and then CDPR RNG takes over and it bleeds the same fucking unit over and over. I think the card probably deserves 1 star. I don't really see it. Like, even in like an Anna deck, it's just like, ugh. Nathaniel just feels so bad. Hubert is a more efficient charge target, but you have to play a 7 for 7 in order to actually get that. And it's also bleeding, whereas one of the advantages that charge decks have is that a lot of times their engines are pretty good at also just removing other engines. So it allows you to keep playing engines while trying to answer the opponent's things. And like snowball that way, as opposed to just like having to choose between playing engines and answering the other person's engines. So like Hubert's not as good at that game. It's like you're giving up some stuff. After Shawnee was printed, this card just got way worse. Because like, it's nowhere near as exciting. I'd give it 2 stars. I think you could still run it in a charge deck if you really wanted to. But charge is already like somewhat niche, like viable, but not amazing. So that's not particularly high praise. Margarita's a lock. Margarita is pretty bad right now. Because why would you run a lock in NR when you don't have other, like, you don't have other incentives to purify in your deck, so you're kind of just handing your opponent a freebie a lot of the time. The card's also just kind of inefficient, but it is like a human. You could consider it in Draug for that, I guess, kind of. I don't know. The card maybe gets 2 stars. Fenar, like, yeah, 2 stars seems about right for Marg. The card's not doomed to be. I changed my mind. This card sucks. 1 star. After I say it out loud, Margarita is pretty fucking bad. Trollolo. Trollolo, if you have enough warfare, is like decent. Kind of just a stat pile. Kind of a little awkward to be running a stat pile in NR. Just especially in like a resupply deck, because so few of the other cards that actually make it into like the resupply versions of the NR Siege deck go tall. But the card is technically viable, and you see it a decent amount. And you need to do very little to get this to like okay heights. So I give it 3. Immortals. Immortals is the reason you would ever consider playing Ragnar. Ragnar's pretty bad, but Immortals is good enough in Ragnar, and honestly, potentially good enough at just like soaking random pings if that ever becomes a thing. And like that kind of, I wonder if that's a thing. I would give the card at least 3. Card deserves to be called viable. All right, and we have 8s. Quite a few 8s. John Natalis, Warfare Tutor, was a laughing stock last patch, but Warfares don't entirely suck now, so he gets a 4. Because he's pretty decent. You can definitely run the card if you want to. Visigoda. Visigoda... Visigoda's so weird. Visigoda's really funny. I'll give Visigoda 2 stars because I feel like humoring Visigoda. The card's actually not like too awful right now. It's only pretty bad. If the meta somehow gets even more like you do kind of just cheese people that don't run removal by running this card. I don't know. It's a weird card. King Ragnar. I mean, he kind of builds the Ragnar deck. But, like, not really even. Not, like, as much as Immortals do. I'll still give him 3. I don't know. I feel like humoring King Ragnar. I think King Ragnar's probably better than, like, the Visigoda pile. It's like, close. King Ragnar gets to play a really high-value portal, which is nice. I don't know. Yeah, fuck it. 3 stars, King Ragnar. I never thought I'd see the day. It's like Prince Dennis. I don't know. Prince Dennis is weird. Card's like pretty good at comboing with stuff. But like you have Radia to do that now. Card still makes it in just as like an enabler for Visigoda, if that's or Visigurd, not Visigoda. If you like want to run that line. That's like an okay card you can throw in NR. I'll give it 3. Visigurd, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily need Prince Dennis, is much more ubiquitous. Card's pretty annoying. It's in a lot of lists. Give it 4. Yeah. Black Rayla, solidly a 1-star engine. Card's like too awkward. Like, having to do something just to get a 5 deal 2 per turn engine. That's, like, not necessarily trivial to do, especially when your opponent's going to be trying to kill this thing. Like, it sucks. Vandergrift. Vandergrift is weird. I honestly, like, first time I looked at Vandergrift, I thought it would be pretty decent. But the card is just kind of clunky to find a timing for. If you're using this card as 5 carryover, it's like not that much better to play Vandergrift as a response to a dry pass than it is to just like play a 4P card. The card also just manages to get stuck in your hand in round 3. And like NR as a faction right now, because it's so shoopified, is kind of just like play all your bronzes round 1, play all your golds when you need to, or in round 3. So like Vandergrift kind of seems like he's in the wrong market right now. I would give the card 2 stars just because, like, in terms of raw value and in terms of filling a unique niche, like, Vandergrift seems fine in both regards. But, like, he's, like, kind of fringe. You wouldn't really play him right now. Partly because there's so many broken NR golds, but, you know. Botchling's weird. For some reason, I see this card a lot more than seems appropriate. I don't really know why. Like, it's a decent engine if you're playing an engine pile. It's like, I don't know. I think Botchling probably deserves... Botchling's, like, kind of underwhelming enough in all regards that I'm almost tempted to call Botchling 1 star. Like, Botchling's not a particularly scary engine if it lives. And it dies to, like, 5, which is a pretty common number right now. Yeah, who the fuck plays Botchling? One star. Vests. Zeal is too unreliable unless you're playing, like, all the Zeal. This card's, like... I don't really see this card coming back. This card was, like, sort of okay at one point, but, like, no. I'm giving it 1. Taller has the Centurion Envoy problem. It's, like, a little bit better than Centurion Envoy. It's, like, big Centurion Envoy. It's still pretty clunky and not that impressive. I give it 2. It's a little more playable in a charge deck. Foltest Pride. Foltest Pride wants to be in 3 different decks at once. It wants to have soldiers. It wants the siege engine to be relevant. And it wants you to play charges so that you can actually, like, use the ability multiple times. Because of that, it's just too clunky to go into, like, pretty much any of them. I think it probably solidly deserves a 1. You could theoretically play it in, like, a more mid-rangey siege and then maybe just run, like, winch for it or something. But, like, that doesn't sound exciting. Like, you winch your Foltest Pride and it's like you boost it by 3 and you deal 4 damage. For all that setup that you had to do. Like, that's not... Obviously, that winch is pretty good, but it's, like... For the amount of work involved, not really. I think it's safe to call it a solid 1. I don't see it ever coming back. Mad Kian. I see this card a decent amount. It usually because of stuff like Prince Dennis or whatever. I never understood why. This card looks horrendous to me. And this card usually performed horrendously against me. I haven't really played it much. But, I guess I'll give it 2 stars for kind of existing, although it's really gotten phased out. Odrin. Probably the single most laughable gold in all of NR. It's really bad. 1 star. Pavetta goes in the Foltest deck. Pretty much the reason you'd play that deck. Kind of like the Commando which I rated similarly 3 stars, so I'll give Pavetta 3 stars. Death Mold, lol, 1 star. I maybe lied when I said Odrin was the most laughable guild. Dandelion. Dandelion at 6 is a lot better than at 5. The card can actually stick in like a charge deck. Also, there are a lot more charges to go around. Dandelion, I think, is like useful. Like, you'd always play Dandelion with Visigoda, but there are a lot of other uses for Dandelion that are like fine, like Visigoda. Like, all of the charge cards just work just fine. Archer is really nice for Dandelion as well. I'd give Dandelion a solid 3 stars. I think you throw him into most charge decks that are trying to play Engine-y. So yeah. Vandergriff's Blade. Boost an allied unit by 6. When you play a knight, boost it by 1. This card just does too little for like any archetype. There is literally no other reason in this entire faction for knights to all be in one deck. And a lot of the knights, like Seltkirk, have just been kind of crept out of the meta. So Uno star. Sabrina's Inferno. Sabrina's Inferno is funny. After the change to Draug, I don't think you would ever play it. This card was actually like sort of not. This card won me 1 game once. I'm tempted to give it a star for that. I'm just fucking with you. I'm giving this card 1 star. It's a little bit too niche. Is it though? Is it actually? Like, currently, if you're playing Draug.deck and your opponent is playing Scumatel Elf.deck, isn't this card actually like kind of good? I think I know what we're playing next. I think I know what I'm trying next. I'm gonna give it a whopping 2 stars, because I get a feeling that's gonna fail horrendously, but I'm still excited to try it anyway. You do have to like actually set something to 1 to even get it to go off twice, and it damages your. God, it's so situational, but fuck it. I need some Shalemar equivalent for NR for chat to actually not like fall asleep. Anyways, Neneke. Neneke is a key ingredient to Igniclone NR, which I am very ashamed to acknowledge as a real deck. God. This card's also not like terrible as just like a charge card. Like, it compares unfavorably in terms of raw value to K20 Sergeant. But like, charge card but bigger is like not a terrible gold for like a charge deck. This card can make it into charge lists, so I think it's fair to say this card's a 3-star card. It's also like a little bit of a more flexible Stennis, which is only 1p lower. Seltkirk. I give Seltkirk. I mean, it goes into full test. I could give it 3 because of that. I'll give it 3 because of that. Fine. Priscilla. Pretty key card, charge card. Give it 3. Shawnee. Pretty key charge card. Shawnee's like a really key charge card. Shawnee is like so good that even though the card's like not particularly common right now because of the types of NR that people are playing, I'm tempted to give it fucking 4 stars anyway. But I'll give it 3. Because I think that's more accurate to my rating system. Donamir. God. It feels wrong to rate a defender 1 star, especially because some people try to play him in engine decks. But he just feels so bad. I'll give him 2 stars just because enginepile.deck, if there are ever few enough purifies, you would run him in. But like, he's really niche. Prophet Lebioda. Kind of too weird to make work even for a Ragnar deck, even though that's probably where you'd put him. I'd give Leviota a solid 1. Reynard just has been crept as an engine. Although I occasionally see him for whatever reason. But, like, I refuse to acknowledge Reynard's existence. I give Reynard 1 star. Prince. How much of the credit do I give to Prince for Radia on Sace? Honestly, with Coherent, this is just a 5-star card, even without Radia on Sace. Like, the card is just good. The card is kind of just good. Like, just being able to combo with so many things, kill something while playing for a lot of points. Prince is kind of just the Coherent combo target. You can combo with Knighthood. Like, you can combo him with so many things that are worse than just using Radia. But also, you can just use Radia. And I guess just for that, we'll give Prince 5 stars. Card's kind of ridiculous. Kira's kind of fallen off the face of the planet. Still, like, I don't think you would ever even really run this in an engine deck anymore. It's, like, kind of a weird card, because you want it in, like, decks that have bigger bodies, which tend to be more, like, mid-rangey. But the card's just not good enough for a mid-rangey deck. It gets purified. It gets, like... It's just awkward in so many ways. It needs a really long time to work, too. I don't really see Kira ever coming back in her current form, but, like, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch if Engine NR got better. So I guess I'll give her 2 stars. Bloody Baron's a solid 4 star, I think. Bloody Baron's not like the NR gold that's, like, pushing NR to new heights. But Bloody Baron is the NR gold that bullies everything that would otherwise beat NR. Bloody Baron feels a little bit redundant with Radia Prince, because Radia Prince also just tall hates. But Bloody Baron's just efficient enough that you, like, throw him in most of those decks. Philippa's, like, almost a 5-star gold. Philippa's a little too easy to play around, a little too low point, a little too, like, weak to armor. Like, a few too many things go wrong for Philippa. To really say Philippa's, like, super defining. There are actually NR lists where Philippa gets cut if you want to run enough greedy golds, like Caretaker nonsense or things like that. Although usually she doesn't. Like, there's enough to go first that Philippa pretty much goes into every NR. It's maybe a little wrong to say Philippa's a 4-star card. Because Philippa's like pretty serious. I guess Philippa deserves a 5. Fine. Philippa is, like, literally Philippa. Philippa's kind of gross. Adalia. Adalia goes in the caravan deck, like, sometimes. I guess I'll give her a 3. Adalia is weird, because Adalia is kind of expensive for what she does. I kind of figured this card was gonna, fall into obscurity, but there are still enough reasons to play her, sort of, in a lot of, like, more, like, combo-y decks. Falibor. Yeah, I have to think real hard about this one. Oh, wait, I was just labeling 10s by accident. Let me check how many 10s there were. Okay, there are literally only 3, which is why I was confused. Yeah. So Falibor gets an easy 1. No, it's fucking Falibor. 5 stars. Vernon's still sort of runnable in an engine pile, but like, Vernon's fallen by the wayside real damn quick. I'll give him 2 stars. Other Vernon gets 3 stars for being a key part of Full Test, which is still, like, a sort of decent, like, not quite sure why you'd play it right now, but, like, solid option if other NR stuff gets nerfed, and, like, also viable. Like, Full Test competes pretty well with a lot of other decks. It's just not quite the superior NR variant. War Elephant kind of weird enough in Ragnar and like a little bit clunky enough and like unimpressive enough that I'm only going to give it 2 stars. Draug. Draug's at least a 4 now. Draug does define the Draug deck with just like the human pile. Honestly, Draug has been so crazy throughout like literally all of fucking NR. Draug might just still be a 5. Because that new Draug deck is really annoying. And Draug kind of just defines how you play against that deck. I don't know. Draug's no Falibor. I'll give it a 4. Also, I labeled all of the, let's see. 2. I forgot to separate some stuff because these are all 11 plus. Yeah. Okay, so Draug, I'll give Draug a 4, and then Siege. Siege is an easy 5. Siege is gross. Siege and Falibor, like, extra gross. Prince is pretty gross too, when you factor in Radia. Like, I would, honestly, Philippa compared to like Siege, Falibor, Prince, not really as gross. I think I would revise Philippa to just be a 4. Philippa's at least easier to see coming, easier to play around, not as hopeless. Also, not quite as just high raw value. So yeah, that's NR. Burned through that. Also burned through my ability to successfully run a stream. I'm getting pretty tired and ready to eat. So yeah. Thanks for watching. Peace.